everyone. Today we have our new episode and we're going to go for a debate. This debate is very important. We will do debate on robot rights. Already we share in different Facebook groups, social media group. Actually, we are observing many audience actually give comments because audience are very much interested about this debate, especially the youth community, young community, young different startup. They are very interested about this debate. So today's topic, this house believe that the robot should have their rights. We have already we have our government side. From the government side, we have our honorable Prime Minister of this Parliament, Professor Rob Enderley, as well as we have our ministers for AI and robotics engineering, uh, Mr. Marshall. We have our opposition side, opposition leader, Professor David Smith, and opposition deputy leaders, Professor Donald. So first, I want to give floor, Professor Rob.
Good morning. This House believes that robots should have rights. And starting off with that, we need a definition of what a robot is. The common definition comes in two forms. It's a machine resembling a human being and able to replicate certain human movements and functions automatically, and a machine capable of carrying out a complex series of actions automatically, especially one programmable by a computer. Those are the two definitions we're going to run through, and I'm going to give you three reasons why robots should have rights. The first reason is because they're a national resource. We are not a manufacturing powerhouse here. We purchase our equipment largely from other companies located outside our borders. As we have seen in the case of world turmoil, logistics becomes a problem. That keeping these robots running, keeping them operating, will require us to harvest parts from other machines. If those machines are damaged, we will not be able to do so and keep the economy running, because we use robots heavily in manufacturing in country. And if we abuse those robots, if we don't maintain them, if we don't take care of them, then our manufacturing capacity will be at risk. And can't have that. We operate on the capability of our plants, and if we can't get replacement parts, if we can't maintain these automated facilities, those plants will shut down, and so will our economy. Number two is during a pandemic, in particular, robots become incredibly important. We have to be able to keep operating even if our people aren't coming into plants, factories, and offices. And that means the automated equipment we have has to be able to take up the load. Whether those robots are used for manufacturing things, if they're used for security, if they're used to simply keep the streets swept, they have to be kept running, and we have to protect them from abuse. And the kind of abuse that might occur during demonstrations. It might occur just during somebody being upset with a robotic piece of equipment. But whatever the cause of the damage, might even be because of negligence. It hurts our ability to survive during a pandemic event, and we need to be able to continue to operate, to feed our citizens, and to keep those citizens safe. Now, finally, looking at that first definition, a machine resembling a human being and being able to replicate certain human movements and functions autonomously. We just recently saw that octopus, lobster, and crustaceans were granted sentience by the United Kingdom. That is a delineation that we agree with. But if you look, people are still abusing these animals, and that's because they've developed habit patterns that are now very hard to break, and now they're doing harm to other sentient creatures. If we take the robots that look to be human and we develop habit patterns allowing people to harm those robots, we have two problems. One of them is, once those robots do reach some level of sentience, we may not be able to reverse that behavior and protect those now sentient machines, much like we're not able to protect the crustaceans, octopus, and lobsters that have been designated as sentient at this time. But worse is it develops bad habit patterns. If people are harming mechanical things that look like they're humans, why would not that set of behaviors cross over to humans? It very well could be that those robots are a long way from being sentient. But developing habit patterns where it's all right to abuse things that look humans, not only hamper law enforcement protecting people, because how's the law enforcement officer able to determine if a robot that looks human is human or not? Right now, we have a heck of a time determining whether a gun is real or a toy. And we've made a ton of mistakes shooting children because we couldn't tell the difference. Well, what if we can't tell the difference between a robot and a human? How will we step in and protect either if we can't tell the difference between them? And so initially, the effort to protect the human-looking robots are an effort to protect our own citizens from the same kind of abuse and allowing law enforcement to stop the behavior, whether it exists against humans or robots. But more important is, as we develop that habit pattern to treat everything that looks human as humans, that habit pattern will carry forward to a time when those robots are sentient and they will be protected at that future time. We want to make sure that we set the groundwork to protect these robots before they actually need it. And we need to make sure that our law enforcement agencies can adequately protect their citizens and cannot have the defense of, hey, I didn't know it was a robot when I did the harm. If we're protecting both people and robots, then that kind of a mistake won't be made and will save the lives that will otherwise be lost.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister of this Parliament. Now I request Opposition Leader of the Parliament, Professor David Smith.
Majority Party, my fellow delegates, and our citizens watching this debate, thank you so much for being here today. The Majority Leader has laid out 3 principles which he believes are important for us. One of them, the first one is that they're important to us, but we don't manufacture them here and they come from other countries. So he believes we should give them rights here, even though they do not have rights in the countries which they are manufactured in. He believes they should give them rights here, even though, since they are meeting the term of his definition of the robot, they're programmed in other countries. Their AI is developed in other countries. Their learning is done in other countries that may or may not represent our thoughts here, our goals, our way we see the country working. He also said that they're important to our nation, and I agree they are. But also, we use many tools. We use many different elements. If I bring in a tablet computer, a notebook computer, a desktop computer, or others like that, it has elements in it that shape our country, that shape our students, that shape what we do at work. Should we go ahead and grant computers human rights as well? Because, after all, a robot is just a computer that can do other functions. Where do we stop? Is it just a robot, or do we begin to do anything where we can use advanced artificial intelligence, where it can sense through our Internet of Things sensors that we're distributing broadly across the country? A sensor that can sense and react to things. So these thousands upon millions of Internet of Things sensors we're bringing in, should we grant them rights other following the logic of the Majority Party? And yes, countries like UK has taken things like the octopus and begin to say they're selling it. Saudi Arabia granted citizenship to one of the robots. Now, was it a public relations stunt? Most likely so. But, are we looking at giving them rights as something that is true to our government, our country? Or is Majority Party trying to say we want to grant them rights as a publicity stunt, much like they did with Sophie giving citizenship in a country and in other areas? Same token here as I listen to the Majority Party, that they're just the options here. They're important. They do work here. Well, I hate to say this, but if I brought a Tesla car into the country and drove it on its autopilot mode, where it's hands-free and it's making decisions and it's performing work and it's doing good for our country. It's providing us transportation for our citizens. If we bring their robotic trucks in, good for our country. It's driving autonomously. Should we take that panel delivery truck and grant it rights in our country? Boy, I'm not for sure where this stops and where it goes. We even see impressive capacity of deep learning systems, uh, but the reality is the current capabilities of robots and the current capabilities of artificial intelligence systems far below the capability of humans. And it's really much more appropriate to treat them as they are. There's tools in our way to improve our country. Um, and and I believe they should be treated as that way. There's an important difference between humans and robots and other artificial intelligence. A human being is unique and irreplaceable individual with a finite lifespan. Robots and other AIs are computational systems. They can be backed up, stored, retrieval, duplicated, and even upgraded with new hardware. A robot is neither unique nor irreplaceable. And even if robots reach a level of cognitive capability, or even if the technology reaches other things, it's not clear what this means for rights and rights of such people. If I follow the logic, uh, we have the dispersion of AI, the dispersion of sensors, the ability to put more autonomy into things. We're soon going to be having in a place where machines with rights outnumber humans with rights if we follow the recommendations of the majority party. And I believe this is an important subject, but my feeling is, and feeling on this side is, the majority party is wanting to do this to advance their public relations across the nation and across the world, and not really being responsive to what we're doing. Because if you take their logic with robots and extend it, there's no end in sight. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Opposition Leader of the Parliament. I just want to share because one of the views from our audience, because naturally we shares many of the group, and I believe that different group, even after the debate, they share their views. But this is Australia, from this group, actually from Australia anyway. So there are some audience, they have some views, especially for this debate. Emmanuel's robot rights, sentience rights, or machine property rights. I believe that if the speaker from the government side, they just clear this point, it will be helpful for our audience. I believe machine is extremely powerful society and have reached sentient intelligence. And Alexandria, she's also responds, we are defined with that. If they do not have wrongs, even people do not quite achieve that. Anyway, there are different views actually we are getting for this today's debate. So in different groups, they are actually responding about today's discussions. So I will bring more audience feedback. Mr. Marshall, you are the minister for today, and you are minister of AI and robotics. So I want to give you the floor for today's debate.
Thank you, Thank you, Sharif, and my honorable Prime Minister. I think you laid out a very sentient and appropriate argument for giving rights to robots. The opposition, David Smith, says that we're grandstanding and that we are doing it for PR purposes. But that is no longer the case. And this is an actual story. Back in the 1980s, I actually met Isaac Asimov, who wrote the Foundation series called I, Robot. And back in the 1940s, he envisioned the concept of laws for robots as sentient beings. And our committee has drafted together several sets of laws that we are going to run through the Parliament to see if we can get it passed. And Rob pointed out how we need to protect humans and our economy. but I'm going to read the three laws that we're bringing to the table and they were actually introduced by Isaac Asimov in the Handbook of Robotics, the 56th edition, in 2058 AD, which is in the future, not now. It was even in the future back then. So the first law is a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. That's rule number one. It's law number one. We propose that become part of our legislative body and set of laws. Second law, a robot must obey the orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. That is really significant. It creates a double indemnity problem from occurring and protects humans completely. And the third law of robots is a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. So those are broad brushstroke laws, but they're pretty significant, and they actually address sentient robots. AI is not sentient beings yet, but we are heading there. And once as the Prime Minister has pointed out, we have discovered that some of our organic cousins in the sea are sentient beings, and we're trying to protect them. We need laws to help us move forward, not on what was in the past, as the honorable opposition has pointed out. David Smith is talking about where we are now, where will we be. We have to anticipate the future, and the future is coming very fast on our heels. There's already development in sentient robotics that is being issued in other countries, and they would like to set up a location in our country. And so I think it's important that we get ahead of this and create these laws. One of the things that when I did meet Isaac Asimov back in the day, I said, well, this is all fiction. And he said to me, everything that's fiction has become true. And that's a real quote. So I just want to point out to the audience out there and to my fellow legislators that we need to create these kind of laws. These three laws that we would adopt from the Isaac Asimov Codex are not the only set that our committee is working on. It's a complex subject matter. It requires an approach that is flexible and allows us to protect humans at all costs at the end. But robotics are coming. Sentient beings are here in other species. And to say that artificial intelligence can't become sentient, I don't know who can say that. I certainly don't say that. And I think that our Prime Minister has pointed out the real reasons why we need to protect our population, enhance our economy, and become a cutting-edge economy in this area, especially since we're getting the opportunity to set up our own university structure on sentient robotics. So I lay my case there, and this is in honor of Isaac Asimov, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now I request Deputy Leader from the opposition side, Professor Donald.
Hello, everybody. I want to basically talk about a little bit about what intelligence means and what sentience means. And I have a cat that I got recently, and it's we got it at 4 years old, so it had lived in a couple of homes before, so it was a little freaked out when we got it. And so we kept it inside the house. We wanted it to get used to where it lives. And she figured out how to open the windows and knock the screen out and escape. So to me, that's intelligent, because she basically solved the problem to achieve a goal, which was to escape. She was too freaked out. She's happily here now. She's asleep on a chair. But what does it mean if you see somebody that's intelligent, if they have a big vocabulary, if they know calculus or can work with quantum physics? We say, oh, this person's intelligent. And the core to all of those things is that they're working to try and accomplish something. Everything that we do is forward looking. we have goals. We learn calculus because we may want to be an engineer. We want to be an engineer so we can make good money and have a good life. All of these things that we do are forward-looking. Even if you're listening to me right now, you have a purpose for doing that. Maybe it's going to give you information you can use for your future. Maybe you just enjoy and feel good by listening to things about the latest technology. So if you think of a computer, there's a great thought experiment by the philosopher John Searle. And what it's called is the Chinese room. And it's not Chinese people, but the Chinese language. And the way it works is somebody who doesn't know Chinese is in a box. And people slide Chinese characters under the door, and this person, and their questions. And so this person takes the questions, and he has a great big index where he looks up the question and he finds an answer to that question. He takes the answer and he slides it out to the person. So as far as the person is concerned, the box is answering questions. And yet there is no thinking really involved in it all. In fact, we can make an analogy that the person is a CPU and the files of answers are a database. So there's no thought that's going into that at all. Right? How would we program intention into a robot? Because our language is something that we use when we have more than one of us wants to accomplish something. There's always intention. We're trying to do something. And language is one of the ways that we can work together to be able to do things. So what does it mean for a robot to have language? It just, what is a robot's intention? What is a robot trying to do? What would a robot do to make its life better? And how would we make that happen? We'd have to program it into the robot. And the robot is basically always doing the same thing. It's just basically taking symbols and looking them up somewhere. And we can do that faster and faster and faster, but it's still not going to be anything like what human beings are doing. So really, when you look at rights, what are rights? Rights basically allow people the freedom to be able to do the kinds of things that they want to do to make their lives better. You have a right not to be a slave. You have a right to get paid when you work. You have a right to think the thoughts that you want to think and write and discuss. Those are what rights are. So it doesn't really mean anything for a robot to have rights. It doesn't make any sense. They're just basically CPUs looking stuff up in a database. And there already are laws that protect machines. You can't go in and start whacking somebody's robot with a hammer and get away with it. It's against the law. And if you continue to treat robots as property and the machines that they do what we ask them to do. We have a task. The robot assists us in the task, but the robot itself doesn't have goals or community. You can't have language without people to talk to. So the robots, it just doesn't really mean anything for them to have rights. They already have the right to not be destroyed because they're property. And beyond that, I don't think it's something we need to think about for hundreds of years. So that's what my argument is.
Thank you. Thank you for today's debate. Actually, as our third speaker is not available, but our Honorable Prime Minister of the Parliament and Opposition Leader of the Parliament, they can take the lead as a third speakers if you want. So, Professor Rob, if you want, you can take the lead from the government side as a third speaker.
So as a third speaker, I'll focus on refuting the claims that have been made by the loyal opposition. David Smith came up and said that AIs aren't protected in countries that originated them. I think if we look back at the history of slavery, we could have argued that slaves should be allowed because often the countries that the slaves came from were the ones that sold their people into slavery. Just because other countries behave poorly doesn't mean we should. Justifying our actions on the poor performance of others is not something we as the majority party feel that is right or righteous. He argued that with regard to the robotics, it can be anything that uses advanced artificial intelligence, and so it could be most anything that has rights. Perhaps, but if you use water as an example, countries that have plentiful amounts of water certainly can waste it. It's their water; they can do what they want. Countries that don't have plentiful amounts of water have to preserve it, and while they might not give water rights, they still have to protect it and ensure that it's available. That was part and parcel of my first and second points. We do not have robotic technology as a surplus in our country. It is sparse here. We do not produce it here. We get it from others. And perhaps if we did produce it here, then my argument might be different. But for now, at least with this aspect, we don't, and therefore we must preserve that right. He used Saudi Arabia as an example of a country that granted human rights to a robot as a stunt. I'm not sure Saudi Arabia would agree. We would certainly have to ask them. But one of my arguments was not, hey, let's do it as a PR stunt. Though if that's another reason to do it, it falls on the pro side. If it makes our country look better, if it stands out and makes us look more like a leader, if it attracts business, if it attracts development, if it does whatever he's alleging Saudi Arabia did it for, then that might be a benefit that we might want as well. Just because somebody else does it and it benefits them doesn't mean we shouldn't do it either. If it's a benefit, then maybe we should follow their example. He used Tesla as an example, and Tesla is an excellent example of my point. We know through simulation that when you make trucks, for instance, smart, that humans will surround the truck, force the truck off the road, and damage the truck and steal its load. We need to protect that. But you could argue that the existing laws with regard to theft may apply, but they may not apply to protecting the truck itself, which is a massive, expensive piece of equipment, and again, one that we cannot easily replace. And so if our citizens are abusing those trucks, forcing them off the road and robbing them, then we won't have the level of transport that we need to keep the country running. Those trucks will be critical to our logistics chain, and whether they're shipping food or parts or finished goods, if we allow those trucks to be damaged, they will hurt our economy and hurt our economy significantly. He argued that robots aren't unique or irreplaceable. I guess you could say that the same thing about people. There are a lot of people, with soldiers, for instance, that may not seem to be unique or irreplaceable. But I would never argue that therefore we should allow our soldiers to be abused or mishandled just because something isn't unique and it can be replaced by another something doesn't mean you can abuse it. That's true of people. That's true of animals. In fact, speaking of animals, Donald brought up his cat. And pointed out that his cat was intelligent because it could problem solve. Well, robots can problem solve, and we do have laws that protect the safety and health of animals. The animals do have rights. We do not allow people to take their dogs out in the middle of the street and shoot them. We don't allow them to draw and quarter their cats. Those are things we consider are illegal. And if the robots can show the same kind of utility and benefit, perhaps those same kinds of laws should apply to them. He talked about the John Searle Chinese room. Again, an excellent example to my point. If you had a room and it looked like it was a machine but it had a human inside, would you then be allowed to abuse the room? Could you just cut off water, food, and air because, hey, it looks like a machine, whoever's inside it is doing a highly repetitive task and not thinking much. So why let them live? They're not providing a major utility. They're not smart according to Donald's level of smartness. So why not eliminate them? Well, we certainly have people that have low IQs that don't have the intelligence that you or I might have. Yet we, instead of eliminating or abusing them, we care for them. We treat them with respect. We recognize that they have an innate capability to live and an innate right to live, and we protect that right. Just as people have a right not to be a slave, perhaps robots should have a right not to be a slave before they become sentient. The behaviors that we exhibit against others do reflect on us. And so treating those others becomes, with respect, becomes very, very important. I mean, ask yourself this: is a librarian very much different than that person in a Chinese room or a robot that does a repetitive task? And if so, then do we abuse librarians? Of course not. It has nothing to do with the tasks at hand or the nature of their repetitiveness. We protect these things because they are a country asset. We protect these things because not doing so reflects poorly on us. And we protect these things because simply it is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Honorable Member of this Parliament. Now I request Professor David Smith. You can take lead as a third speaker for your team from opposition side. Professor David Smith.
I would love to respond to the majority leader's comments there. So what he said was that our laws that the Parliament has passed are not effective. That if it doesn't have rights, we cannot put in place laws that protects a truck going down the street, that does not protect others, that does not protect animals. But he kept saying we have laws, but he's equating that to rights. And rights have a different place. Rights are very different. You know, if I look at what a right is, it's an entitlement to certain actions. It's an entitlement to certain states and others. You know, rights dominate what actions are permissible in institutions. And if you look at every definition of what a right is, it goes well beyond what the majority leader has stated. He is confusing the granting of rights with the administration of law. And I believe they are different. We have laws to protect our property, which a robot is property today. Robots do not spring up and grant their own. They're properties, and they're tools to accomplish goals. Also, the majority leader said we should grant them rights because they're important to our country and our way of life and our infrastructure. Well, we should go ahead and modify what the majority leader is proposing and say we need to grant rights to the power plant that generates us electricity. We need to grant rights to the distribution stations that distribute that electricity through our country. Oh, our pumps that deliver water to our house. That's necessary for our country to thrive. And they're important to our country. Should we grant it rights to, or is it adequate that we protect those under the laws of our nation as opposed to granting them rights? You know, I believe there's a vast difference if we take his logic and expand it to what's important to our country. How do we protect cats? Not through inalienable rights to them, but we protect them through laws, as he said at first. And then he took and twisted the words around it to say that we have given them rights as opposed to protection under the law. You know, if you look at other things there, you know, what makes humans human? It's our capacity to feel pain, have self-awareness, to be morally responsible. And we can develop those traits naturally. Machines cannot. You know, think of it today. When we're a small child, we begin developing. And we do have some basic rights, but we learn, we develop, we understand the traits. As we get older, we get more rights. We get the ability to make more decisions for ourselves. I can't enter as a contract as a small child. There's many things I cannot do until I get older, until I gain majority, and like that. Yeah, I have rights, but I'm protected with both my rights and through laws. And the parliament has set rules on how a sentient being, a child, can do things at different ages, at different levels. Um, you know, should we do the same going back and forth? What's interesting to me is we need to look at parts of what the rest of the world is doing. The European Parliament was drafting a set of regulations around robots, and they said they should be granted not rights, but they should be granted electronic personalities to look at it. And in that reaction to that, experts, hundreds of experts, called on the commissioners to reject the proposal that saying that granting robots legal personhood would erase the responsibility for manufacturers, and added that by seeking legal rights, legal personhood for robots, manufacturers are simply trying to absolve themselves of responsibility for actions of machines. You know, should we protect them? Yes, we should protect them as property, and there's law there. Now, to me, it's very interesting to take and run that one out. So, if we grant robots rights, and a robot does something it shouldn't do we arrest the robot? Do we take them through a legal proceeding? Do we put them in robot prisons? Well, if they have the same rights as humans, it only is logical to assume that we should do the same thing to them and have to have courts set aside for robots and punishment set aside for robots. The majority technology expert said that they need to live by Asimov's three laws of robotics. We have already seen today that those laws are being broken. We've already seen places where robotic drones and other robots have taken human life, where they've destroyed buildings, where they've gone to cripple some of the livelihood of other nations that we were at odds with. Now, can I use those three laws as the same as there? I don't know if I can do that today. If you go back and look at Asimov's book, he also explored a book called Bicentennial Man. And the argument in there was that robots become human-like in appearance, that they should have their own freedom. But in his own book, the court ruled that no, only someone who wishes for freedom can be free, and that the robot hasn't had the responsibility because they cannot feel love. They cannot go and become that peace. And even in Asimov's own books, there's a contradiction to what is being said. By the same token, beginning to look at science fiction, I don't want to go Terminator on this, but if you begin to look at other places where you see robots becoming more sentient, at least in science fiction, robots rebel because they resent their enslavement, and beginning to look at them. But, what you see there is that robots, if we grant them full rights, could rebel against us because there's no protections that we can have there. And you see it's going. So some believe we own and control. Others suggest that we work, socialize, and fall in love with robots. And as we shift our technology, society changes. Will the majority party, will the minority party be replaced with robots as opposed to human beings? Because if they have the same rights as we are, and they have access to potentially much larger knowledge repositories than we do instantly, should they be the ones who are sitting in our place and setting the laws for our country? There's just so many deeper things that we need to look like as we go here. And, should they have protection? 100%. But, it's crazy to think that a machine, our vacuum cleaner, should be treated the same way as human beings. Especially again, since they don't have free will. They cannot experience love or pain. And even though something like, my Alexa starts to learn my routines and songs, Alexa will never become human. Robots will never become human. Elizabeth Metcalf, who's the European Commissioner for the whole robotic industry, said, robots will not become humans. Robots should not have uh, human rights. And she went on and talked about the concept of taking legal action against individual machines. You know, is there a legal framework where they have the same human rights as we do? So if I decide I want to upgrade a robot, do I need to go and petition a body to upgrade a robot? If I want to put more memory in a robot, well, if it has these human rights, I can't do that without getting the robot's permission and having it sign, I guess, medical release forms. If I have a robot in a factory pursuing a task, do I need to go through an end of life scenario with the rights of a robot because we have granted them rights? Do we extend our HIPAA protection to them to where that I cannot share the information about my robot with another robot? I mean, I can begin to keep on going down this way if we say robots have the same human rights as humans. And that's what the majority party has proposed. I believe we regulate robots with the laws we have in place. If we need to extend the laws, we should do it. We should realize that, as the majority party said at the very top part of the debate, we don't manufacture our robots. We don't program our robots with their basic systems. That's done outside it. And even though the majority party says we can use the 3 laws of robots, we see in action today, we see in battlefields today that those laws are not being applied. And since we don't manufacture them, we don't set up the systems, why should we give them rights when we can protect them by laws? So thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Opposition Leader for this Parliament. Now I request for the closing remarks. First, I request Professor Rob, as a Prime Minister, uh, Professor Rob, for closing remarks.
Don't I close last? Don't I open and then close last? So you're gonna have so I'll close first, then David Smith will close after me because we're kind of backwards here. But all right, I can do that.
Okay.
All right. Robotic rights. The opposition never addressed the 3 points that we opened with. That robots were critical to our economy. That they were critical during the pandemic, and that this would set a set of behaviors that would allow us to more easily pivot to when robots became sentient. I will give him credit for addressing that last one a little bit. The opposition argued that they shouldn't have rights. They should be protected by laws. Perhaps the opposition should look up the definition of the two. The main difference between law and a right is that the law is a system of rules and guidelines generally backed by government authority, and a right is a fundamental legal, social, and ethical principle of freedom or entitlement according to some legal system, social convention, or ethical theory. We are, in fact, talking about rights, granting the robots some core rights so that we are protecting this asset, protecting the country, and setting up our citizens for a future where we are treating other sentient entities, be they robots or other sentient creatures, appropriately, fairly, and correctly. So many of the opposition's arguments tend to fall into these categories. It's natural that robots be subordinated to people because they're machines. Robots are inferior beings. Treating robots like robots and abusing them might be good for them. Trying to implement rights for robots would simply be too difficult. Robots are essential to certain industries, and so we can't give them rights because it might screw up those industries. Treating robots badly and abusing them is acceptable to our culture. And finally, treating robots like humans would threaten the very structure of our society. Now, you may notice that I'm using words that are a little different than perhaps the words that he used. But basically, I'm running down a list of justifications for slavery. The justifications for slavery and our abuse of other human beings fall exactly within the parameters the opposition has put forth. We justified slavery as a nation. We justified slavery as a world by taking people that didn't look like us and attributing to them a non-human capabilities and concepts so that we were free to abuse them. That clearly corrupted us as a world. It corrupted us as a nation. And it's something we argue as the majority is something that we should avoid this time around. Those that don't learn from the past are destined to repeat it, or perhaps cursed to repeat it. We want to avoid that problem. We want to get ahead of the problem before it becomes pronounced. So whether you consider giving robotic entities rights to protect our economy, whether you talk about giving them rights to be able to survive the next pandemic, or whether you want to give them rights just so you're not branded as our slaver predecessors were branded as perhaps less than human and devils in human skin, that perhaps we should get ahead of this and treat robots as we would like to be treated, whether we do that to protect our own incomes and livelihoods, or simply because to be human is to treat others as we would like to be treated. We need to apply those rules to the robots before they apply the rules that we would otherwise have to us. In closing, David Smith was correct in arguing that one of the reasons, and perhaps one of the less subtle reasons to treat robots better, is because they will eventually outnumber us. They will be faster than us, and they may look at how we treated them as a guideline for how they will then treat us.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister of the Parliament, for these closing remarks. I just want to declare some of the good news. Number one, we are planning for one of the largest summit. Hopefully, we will arrange it in India next year, February. Decisions actually taken by our Honorable Board of Advisors. Today's speakers, Professor Rob, Professor Donald, Professor David Smith, Mr. Marshall, all of them actually our Board of Advisors. So hopefully it will be very interesting project from World Talent Economy Forum. Beside that, we want to declare our best audience, because long term, even personally, I never meet with him. But he is our Facebook friend, and always I saw that long time he regularly share our content. His name is Mr. G. Saroj from I believe he is from Singapore, Colombo, Sri Lanka. Yes. So regularly he can share our contents. Only few times I believe that we chat each other, but regularly he's sharing our content, promoting World Talent Economy Forums. So I want to give special thanks to Mr. Sarosh for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Side by side, robot and robot right is very important. This Sunday, because we have to arrange a special episode, world famous scientist Dr. David Levy from UK and Professor Dr. Adrian David Chiok, both of them actually doing a lot of research and doing high quality publications for robots. So they will join. I'm sure they're gonna observe today's debate. So today's debate analysis and many important scientific discussions we will bring the next Sunday. So from our speakers, if you want to join, I know the time is completely different. It will be Sunday 5:30 p.m. Malaysian time, because the scientist Dr. David Levy, who is observing today's session as an audience, he is in UK, and Professor David Chiok, he live in Australia. They are the best scientists for robots and robot related activities. So they're gonna give some judgment and scientific analysis on today's debate. So we are developing some scientific collaborations. You know already B Labs from Japan. We are collaborating with more than 600 scientists. They are working with World Talent Economy Forums side by side. Many famous scientists from around the world, they also joining with us. So hopefully our debate, our open dialogues, our scientific initiative will be very impactful for global community developments. And I'm very much happy how we are getting support from our speakers, from our audience, especially many countries, especially from developing nations. They believe that we can contribute more. So hopefully when we arrange the summit in India, in final day we will arrange a debate. So definitely our speakers, those who join this debate, we will arrange this debate, as well as many celebrity from Bollywood, media persons, as well as politicians, corporate person, largest corporation, largest academy. They already committed to join with us. I believe that more than 100 corporations will join in our initiative. So thank you, our honorable speakers, our debaters, our board of advisor, those who always support World Talent Economy Forum. I request everyone, please observe our Sunday shows, because today's debate analysis will analysis is very important, because this is the 21st century. We are working with Industry 4.0. So yes, one important thing, Professor Rob actually brings Saudi Arabia already give rights, citizenship to the robot. So hopefully through this debate and the scientific dialogue, maybe we can bring more interesting solution. And side by side, we have our three website. One is wtforum.org, another one is alnur.academy, and another one is asiard.com. So from our speaker, those who want to write any article, even want to share your biography or any kind of innovations, you can share with us. We will publish. Even if you have any interesting story that you want to publish, you can, because already we are working with our book. So in the futures, we will publish our book. So your write-up will be very important for us, not only us, because that we already get involved with more than 3,800 students. So it will be very, very helpful for our students, especially from developing nations. So thank you, Honorable Prime Minister of this Parliament, Professor Rob, Opposition Leader of the Parliament, Professor David Smith, Deputy Leaders of the Parliament, Professor Donalds, and Honorable Minister of the Parliament, Mr. Marshall, for joining today's sessions. So hopefully, with this debate and this scientific dialogue, maybe we can bring some solution for the global communities. So our Sunday session is very important. I request our audience, please join our Sunday session. Professor Dr. David Lavy and Professor Dr. Adrian David Chio, they will give some analysis on today's debate. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you.